Hello my beautiful, wonderful people, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Eleanor, and this is honestly just my safe space to talk about all the crazy stuff that goes on in my head. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about on what the fuck is the MONTAWK Project. So, unless you've been living under a rock for the past decade, you are aware of the hit Netflix show Stranger Things, which you may not have known is based off of true events. And I put it in quotation marks because it's all according to one guy in this book that he wrote, and it's kind of like he said, she said that this happened. And I'll get into all of it later on like what that means and whatever. But I did want to give a quick recap on Stranger Things, just for people who may not have seen it. So, Stranger Things takes place in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana in the 80s. And it follows a group of preteens who discover another dimension, like a portal to this other world. One of their friends goes missing, and first season is them trying to figure out what happened to him. And along the way, they come into contact with monsters from another dimension. They meet this girl that was in a lab, and she has psychic powers, and she helps them. And there's 4 seasons, and it goes into so much more lore. But pretty much all you need to know for this video is that this world, this other dimension, known as the Upside Down in the Stranger Things universe, was created in a lab, and they were doing experiments on young kids who had psychic abilities. Now, what I just said is supposedly based on true events, and we're all going to need to put our tinfoil hats on for this video, because this is going to get fucking weird. So, the story pretty much begins with a guy named Preston Nichols in 1992. I'm going to call him Nichols through the whole thing, just so it's not confusing, because there's a few different names going on here. In 1992, Nichols published and wrote the book, The MONTAWK Project, Experiments in Time. And he described this entire book being written in soft facts. Pretty much soft facts are facts that aren't backed up by science. They're not backed up by credible research. They're eyewitness accounts and like people-to-people testimony. So he said himself that some of the things that he talks about, he just gathered from what he heard from other people and his own recollection of what happened. So it may not all be 100% accurate. He said that during the Cold War, that he was coming up with strange radio signals from a piece of equipment that he had designed. He claimed that the signals were coming from the Soviet Union, and this made him feel like a genius, because like he had created this piece of equipment. He designed it himself. He built it. And Nichols was an inventor. He was an engineer, and he built a lot of things like this. And it just kind of boosted his ego when he thought that he was getting radio waves from Russia. Eventually, a military contractor reached out to him and gave him a job. At this point, it's roughly 1971. And they wanted him to use his equipment to see if telepathy was a real thing, which is the scientific term for reading minds, right? And America at the time was not the only one that was doing this. There was testing like all over in different countries during this time period. It was also the era of like MK Ultra, which this story is very, very similar to, which actually has like documented evidence on that actually happened. Like, we know that MK Ultra happened. So I feel like with this, knowing that MK Ultra happened, this story is nuts. But it's not too far out of the realm, considering that MK Ultra is scientifically proven and like proven to actually happen. But Nichols was put in charge of testing these subjects, and he used his knowledge of electrical engineering to perform said experiments on the children that were allegedly abducted. And he was using his equipment to measure the psychics and like their psychic abilities. Before this, Nichols was very about facts, science. He was a non-believer in anything of the supernatural, anything outside the realm of like, oh, this can be documented evidence, like this is documented science. Because of his like knowledge on engineering and his very factual way of thinking, the government knew that he would be a good fit for this job, because they knew that he would just stick to facts, and he wouldn't tamper with evidence, and he wouldn't put anything extra in it to make it sound like glorified. The book doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about his findings in all of it, but he claims that the kids that he worked with were actually psychics. Because at the end of the day, he was a scientist, and he continued doing this study to look at facts and taking notes, but he started to notice something odd as he was going through. He noticed that during a certain point of the day that his psychics would get like jammed, and it would happen exact same time every single day, and it would pretty much stop everything because they couldn't use their psychic abilities, they couldn't use their telepathy, they couldn't read minds. And he eventually ended up tracking it to a radio tower that was on the Montauk military base, which Montauk is in like Montauk, New York. And this military base was under a lot of security, like Area 51 type security. Evidence of this base actually existing is like the Air Force, 'cause that's the kind of base that it was. The Air Force was actually there. Like, it was a very secured military base. It's just what they were doing on it is up for questioning. Now, because of all this security, Nichols couldn't get on the base. And even though he had tried to go there and be like, hey, like, can you guys turn off this giant tower? 'Cause, like, you're jamming my psychics, right? And nobody fucking listened to him. They were like, no, like, you're not authorized. You can't be on this base. But he could see this tower, and this tower was fucking huge. And so he could see it. He fully knew where it was, what it looked like, because it was this giant structure just on top of this building that was chilling on the base. The radio tower was built on the Montauk Air Force Base in 1950, after World War II had ended. And their goal with this tower was to spy on the Soviet Union using the radio signals. But as Nichols is going through this, he's like, why are they sending frequencies so strong that it's jamming my fucking psychics? Right? And he's like, okay, like something else is going on here. Because why are they sending signals at that type of frequency? Nichols had tried to do more research about the base, but he didn't really find anything that would explain why his psychics were being jammed at this exact same time every single day. Base was right on the edge of Long Island, like right along the shore. So he figured that the most logical explanation for what was happening was that the reason why it was there was so that the radio frequencies would send, and they were trying to communicate, and the location was perfect because if they were attacked, they would be the first lookout point. Then eventually in the 1940s, early 1950s is when the Air Force took over the base, because it was originally owned by the Navy, and that's when they built that giant radio tower. The Air Force built it when they arrived at the base. Now, this is what Nichols found odd because he didn't understand why they had, like, this anti-psychic frequency if they were only trying to monitor Russia. But then over a decade later, in 1984, he was able to learn more because the Air Force had officially decommissioned this base. He had broken into this base on multiple occasions. I mean, at this point, it was like he was just going to get trespassing because it wasn't a functioning base. And so he would go in there periodically, like all the time. And he was looking for evidence of anything that could, help him with what he was doing back in the 70s with these psychics. He became infatuated so much with what was going on at this base. During one of his visits, there was this guy there that looked to be like in his 40s, and he appeared to be homeless, like he was like disheveled and like dirty. However, as soon as the guy saw Nichols, he like instantly like he knew him, and he knew shit about Nichols that like nobody would really know. At first, Nichols was like, who the fuck is this guy? Because he was talking to him. And he thought that he was crazy. But the second that the guy started talking to him about personal shit that only Nichols and the people that personally knew him would know, he knew that's like something was off. Something was really odd. Knew a lot about the psychics that he was studying back in the 70s. And the guy was like, yeah, I used to be one of the psychics that you studied. And Nichols was like, no, like, I don't recognize you. Like, you definitely weren't there. And he's like, yeah, I was. Like, you did experiments on me on this base. And Nichols was like, no, like, I've never been on this base, like, I didn't work here, and this guy's like, no, you did. Like, you did work here. And literally, like, a week later, some dude shows up to Nichols' house, just walks in his home, like, he owns it, like, he knows the exact layout, and he's like, yeah, you used to work on the Montauk base. Like, you did experiments on me. And Nichols is like, once again, nope. Never worked there. He's like, no, like, my name is Duncan Cameron. And you did experiments on me. Like, I was your main psychic. And once again, he's telling Nichols things that only Nichols would know. Only things that people who personally knew him would be able to tell him. So he ends up taking Duncan to the base. And once Duncan is there, looking at the structure, he's looking at the building, he's looking at the radio tower, and he goes into, like, this psychic, like, trance. And Nichols is, like, shaking him, like, wake up, like, what's going on? Once Duncan had snapped out of this trance, he was like, yeah, when I was working with you on this base, you taught me how to use my abilities to unlock memories. And Duncan and Nichols had worked together to help unlock both of their memories from what happened on this base. Now, after their memories were unlocked, according to Nichols, in the 1960s, they were told to bring children onto the base to help and train them to use their psychic abilities for the U.S. military. They had also figured out that these children could open up portals and tunnels to other dimensions. And during this time, Duncan was one of these children that Nichols was working with and Nichols was not able to get super close to Duncan because he was supposed to be observing him, and that alone, and taking notes and everything on what he observed and what he saw. He was also never got close when he was in the Montauk chair, especially. Now, the Montauk chair was, you know, like how in Stranger Things they put that little thing on Eleven's head and she can use her powers, and like, I think there's one scene where she's like crushing a can. That's essentially what that was. They put like this thing on their head and they sat in this chair and they turned it on, and their psychic abilities were heightened while sitting in this chair, and they could think of something and it would appear in front of you. And usually it was like a ghost. Like it would appear like if you had like an apple, right? The apple would appear, but you couldn't really interact with it. Like you couldn't touch it. Like your hand would like go through it, right? It was like a hologram. Eventually they realized that if the child was strong enough, if they manifested their thoughts enough, that the thing could physically actually appear. And they could interact with it and touch it. It was also during this time, low-key as like a cover for what was really going on, but it also kind of eventually weaved into like the real truth, was that they were doing communications with the Soviet Union. And they had built a ship that they were hoping they could somehow kind of use in these psychic experiments. And they called this part of the project the Rainbow Project. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you've seen it in Stranger Things. But, so, they were trying to make a ship that was invisible to radar, so they could like sneak up on the Soviets and like jump scare them, right? But what ended up happening was that the ship ended up being invisible to the naked eye, right? And it was removed from the space-time continuum. Now, when this happened, Nichols and Duncan were on it. You know, right? Let's pretend, right? So, like, this is this remote. It's for my lights. This is the ship. Nichols and Duncan are on it. Now, when it was sent out of the space-time continuum, they yeeted themselves off, and they also were, at least what they thought, wiped from the space-time. Now, they would appear again, but we'll get into that. So at this point, it's still the 50s, during the Cold War, right? We on the same wavelength here? Okay. And they're doing more, and they're continuing to do more experiments with the chair. And since this event happened with the ship, they start going into more things with time travel, bending time. And it's during this time that one of the kids is sitting in the chair one day, right? And he's just like, all right, I'm going to think of the most scariest shit that I could think of right now. And he thinks of this giant, like, gross-looking, like, slimy, violent monster, right? And this thing starts destroying everything. It starts, like, it destroys the chair. It destroys the buildings, the whole base. People are freaking, like, getting offed. Like, it's a whole rampage, right? And they're like, okay, we gotta turn off this chair. Like, we gotta get rid of it, because when the chair was on would these things manifest. Once the chair was turned off, it would go away. So they turn off the chair, and the gross, scary monster is now gone. Now, this is all taking place simultaneously as Nichols and Duncan are at least what they think are like sent off the face of the space-time continuum. But actually, they were sent to 1984. During the events of in this alternate reality where, like Duncan and Nichols meet each other at the base and they're recounting all the memories. Right? So Nichols and Duncan find a way back to the 1950s and they go and destroy everything. And they wipe everybody's memories of what happened because, this giant scary monster came and destroyed everything and traumatized hundreds of people. And they realized that what they're doing was like really wrong and fucked up. So they went back in time and they destroyed everything and erased all evidence of the MONTAWK Project. Which is why Nichols did not recall anything until years later when he met Duncan for the first time at the base and he was like, yo, like, we used to work together. He's like, nah, no, we didn't. Now, this is why Nichols didn't remember shit until Cameron once again rejogged his memory. Now, this is all according to the book. And like I had said, it's not exactly scientifically, like, credible. Because the only evidence that we have of this happening is this book. Is what Preston Nichols claimed happened. Because we also have no evidence of Duncan Cameron ever actually existing. It's all just this book. It's like, oh, hey, it's this guy. And that is the story of the MONTAWK Project. And you can really see where Stranger Things is based off of it. Actually, Stranger Things was originally going to be called Montauk, and they are going to film it in Montauk, New York. But Indiana, or like more down south, I'm not 100% sure where they filmed. I think it was Indiana. But it worked out better for them to film it elsewhere. So that's why they came up with Hawkins, Indiana, which is a fictional town, and they tweaked the story a little bit. They didn't go 100% based off of the MONTAWK Project, but it is heavily influenced by it. And that is it for today's video. Please like and subscribe. My socials will be linked down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!